Hello and welcome to the Gooner Talk, back again with you guys for another show, for another episode of our Let's Talk Arsenal series. I'm joined today by Andrew, aka Arseblog. How you doing, mate? Are you well? You good?
Yeah, I'm good, Tom. How are you?
Yes, very good. Very good as we inch towards the first game of the season with, so many signings happened and clearly the plan has gone to plan as we were told it would do. How are your general thoughts ahead of less than 2 weeks now until we kick things off?
I guess I'm a little bit anxious about certain situations. There are a number of issues with the squad that I think need to be resolved. But the window is long, and I think the frustration or the anxiousness that we kind of feel as fans has to be put in the context of the market itself, which appears to be really slow and it hasn't really got going the way I thought it would this summer. There've been some signings. It's not like nothing has happened, but certainly not the volume of deals that I thought would happen across Europe and across the Premier League. And I think we're seeing that, for ourselves. We're hyper focused on what happens with Arsenal, and it would be wrong, though, for us to think that it's only happening to Arsenal. So I think you have to try and step back and look at it in the wider context as well. So I think the ideal scenario where everything gets done before the start of the season, that ain't going to happen. That's not going to happen. But I do think still that plenty will happen before the end of the window, and that's August 31st, and that's a reality that we're going to have to live with, as well as every other football club in Europe at this moment.
Are you annoyed about the fact that kind of we're not seeing all of that happen before the start of the season? Because as we kind of alluded to at the start with the intro, that Arteta talked about this plan that they had going into the window, but do you think it's a failure, or do you think it's just kind of a happenstance of the situation that we currently find ourselves in with the pandemic?
Well, it's kind of hard to know. I mean, they have done some things. Obviously, they brought in a left back. We needed that. They brought in a central midfielder. We're all, I'm sure we're going to talk about Granit Xhaka and all that kind of stuff. But, we were looking for them to do something in central midfield. They have brought in a central midfielder. We brought in Ben White, who's a very promising signing. So certain things have happened. I suppose where I would be most worried are certain areas where, like, for example, in central midfield, we're worried about Thomas Partey. He's got an injury. He's going to miss the start of the season. But in fairness, we've got Granit Xhaka, we've got Mohamed El-Neni, we've got Lokonga to choose from, we've got Joe Willock, we've got Ainsley Maitland-Niles. We're not short of bodies in that particular area. Similarly, I think a lot of people would like a new right back, but we've got four of them. So, the issue is quality, not so much bodies. Where I do have some worries are the goalkeeping situation, where we've got a big gap in the squad as it stands right now. Bernd Leno is the number one, but we're going to have to, unless we make a signing before the start of the window, we're looking at Okonkwo or Runerson being our number two. And if something goes wrong with Leno on the opening day, gets an injury, gets a suspension, that's a problem for us. And the attacking midfield area, I think, as well, even though Emile Smith-Rowe is I think ready to start the season. Over the course of the season, I think we need more than him. So those are issues. As to your question about whether it's a failure, I mean, I'm sure they have a plan. But the issue with transfers is that so much of what you want to do or what you think you can do is contingent on what other people are going to do as well. If you have a plan to be ruthless and move out 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 players, but nobody wants those players, what do you do?
Yeah.
It does throw a spanner in the works a little bit.
I suppose for me anyway, I've kind of got a bit of understanding about the situation, especially when it comes down to kind of the next topic that we're going to come on to, and outs and selling players, and that kind of being a bit of the contingent towards how much we could do bringing players in. Because if you'd have said to me that less than 2 weeks before the end of the window, we wouldn't have made a sale, like we've seen players leave on loan. But if you'd have said that we would have sold no players, I would have been taken a bit aback by that, I think, to be honest, to think how many players there are that we've got that would be up for sale. Your Xhakas, your Torreiras, your Bellerins, even your Nelsons and Ketias, Maitland-Niles, all these guys that I thought were, going to garner a bit of interest, just haven't. And I mean, the whole point of today's show was kind of talk about whether Arsenal made the right choices. And yesterday, Chris Wheatley of Football London did report that Arsenal have, not confirmed, but they signed the deal yesterday with Granit Xhaka to extend his contract. there's been a couple of interesting reports that kind of conflicts ever so slightly the details. Whilst Chris confirmed it was a 4-year deal, The Athletic said that it would at least run until 2024, which tells me that maybe it's a year extension with an option of an extra year to make that 4 years, including the 2 years that are currently on his deal, which doesn't make it sound too bad, just a year extension with another option of another year on the current deal. But a lot of people have kind of assigned themselves to knowing that he wasn't going to be here, which I think is probably the biggest difference, of course. So the simple question is, do you think Arsenal have made the right choice with Granit Xhaka's deal?
I can't really see why we've extended his deal. I don't think Xhaka staying is the biggest problem that we have right now. I think where we were, I don't think it was so much that people, I mean, I think there are people who actively wanted Granit Xhaka to leave, but I think in general, the thing about Xhaka leaving that was so exciting, if you like, was the fact that we were going to have to make a signing, a top-level signing to replace him. So that was one of the areas, and I think we talked about this a little bit last time I was on, that looking at the players we bring in might tell us a little bit more about what Mikel Arteta wants to do with his team and how he wants them to play. So if you sell Xhaka, you have to bring in a signing. You have to bring in a Premier League ready player to slot into that space in the team that Xhaka has occupied for the 5 years that he's been here. So that would have been exciting, because it would have been, well, who are we going to get? Who is this guy? What way does he play? And what way is that going to influence the team? We know what Xhaka brings. We've lived it for 5 years. And I think him staying isn't necessarily the worst thing in the world in a market like the one we exist in, but I find it very hard to get my head around the New Deal thing. I just don't quite understand the thinking behind it, because people are talking about it protecting his value. He doesn't have any value right now in the market. If nobody is prepared to pay for Granit Xhaka at 28 years of age, after a pretty decent season for Arsenal, albeit, you know, one which we finished 8th, a really good European championships, with 2 years left on his deal, and nobody's prepared to pay what we want for him, what is his value? You know, so this isn't about protecting his value. This appears to be a decision based on Arsenal wanting Granit Xhaka as part of the team for the next 2 to 3 years, or 3 to 4 years, however long that might be. And it's also a commitment from Xhaka to Arsenal, because he must know and realize that if nobody's prepared to pay for him this summer, nobody's going to pay for him next summer when he's older. He still has years left on his contract. So he's committed to Arsenal. So that's a mutual decision, I guess. How you think that might influence the team in the years ahead, you know, everyone's going to have their own opinion on that. I think he's a good player, but I also think it probably would have been a good time for him to move on, and for Arsenal to move on and try something different. I don't know why we couldn't have just said, okay, nobody was going to buy it this summer. Let's stay another year, see where you are. You'll have 12 months left on your deal. You know, we can make a decision about you then. And whether it means he stays and sees out his contract, whether it means he goes on a relatively knockdown fee, I just don't really understand the haste in giving him a new deal. So, you know, that's where I am on him.
Let me try and, I'm going to say pitch, but let me try and put forward a suggestion to why they may have extended it, purely based off some of the things that we've all been kind of reflecting on over the last 24 hours. The point you make about kind of Xhaka's market value being, well, he doesn't really have one because no one's willing to pay a price that we're willing to accept right now, is absolutely spot on. In my mind, that is because of the pandemic and the effects on clubs. Because if we're honest, what Premier League club is going to come in for Granit Xhaka this summer? And the answer is no one. No Premier League club's going to come in for him. And so I thought a move to Serie A suits him. I thought that the style of the league suits the way he plays, and I think it would be a really good fit for him going to Serie A. The problem with that is that right now Serie A and clubs across the continent are hugely hamstrung by the financial implication of what they're dealing with, especially in France with the added complication of the TV rights situation.
Yeah.
So say we don't extend. and we keep him for 12 months. And then in 2022, we've upgraded because we've also brought in a central midfielder and he's going to go. That figure of 12 million euros that we were offered plus 3 by Roma is arguably going to be less. And in my mind, a 29-year-old Xhaka in the style of central midfielder that he is, which is not a rapid, mobile type of guy, he's a string puller in the deep part of the midfield and can put a challenge in here and there, but gets turned quite easily. I think a Xhaka with, say, a securer situation with, or a more secure situation with a couple of extra years on that deal, which would be 3 by 2022, would garner more than he's currently being offered in the window in its current context affected by the pandemic. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Like he might do. I mean, we're basing a lot, or making a lot of assumptions about how good the market is going to be next summer. Yeah. And I think realistically, we've gone through, or football clubs have gone through a period of 12 months of incredible instability because of everything that's been going on in the world. But I don't think it's a case that in 12 months you can make up what you've lost. I think the ripple effects of the pandemic and what they've done to football finance are, we'll probably still be talking about it in 3 or 4 years' time. So I don't think it's going to be like next summer the market is going to be completely reset. I mean, I suppose one thing that occurs to me just when you were talking about Xhaka and the style of player that he is that I don't think he's going to have, people talk about how players age and how they, certain characteristics or traits that they have, how they diminish as they get a bit older. So, if you're a Theo Walcott where pace is your super weapon, as you get older, the decline becomes a bit more marked. The impact on your game is much more noticeable. I think, with all due respect to Granit Xhaka, he's not got a lot of pace to lose, So I think maybe he might age out quite well, and that might be a factor in the club's thinking. Maybe they're looking at, the potential of Lokonga to be part of our midfield in the long term. Maybe even someone like Miguel Aziz. That having a player like Xhaka at the club is beneficial in that regard, because it allows you to sort of bed those guys in a bit more slowly. And I suppose the other thing that I would say that we probably have to think about is that what we think of Granit Xhaka and what the manager and his teammates think of Granit Xhaka are two very different things. Like, I get that people were ready for a change. It's, we've had 5 years of him. We haven't improved any while he's been in the team. And look, this is not to put it all on him. There are myriad issues as to why Arsenal finished 8th 2 seasons in a row, but he was part of it. And if people were ready to move on from that, fine. But I think he's hugely respected within the club, within the dressing room. He is an important figure, a captain-like figure, even if he's not necessarily the captain, or not anymore anyway, after what happened. So those are things that, we look at it externally in one way. I think internally it will be something, a little bit different.
I was resigned to losing Xhaka this summer. The chat box will confirm that I really have appreciated kind of what he's done and tried to look at him as for the positives that he brings to the team. And I think that's most noticeable when he's not there, which is a strange way to kind of compliment a player, is that you understand how good they are when they aren't there. And that obviously does go to tell you kind of the lack in depth that we have to replace him when he's not there. But I was certainly ready to see kind of that story come to an end at Arsenal, for Arsenal to move for a different style of central midfielder. Moving on to kind of slightly in a more advanced position in the midfield and the attacking midfield role, that Smith Rowe, of course, signed a new deal is the big thing that we have confirmed right now, which is a great bit of news for Arsenal, of course. But we do seemingly still want to add someone in that position. At the start of the window, it appeared like the priority was Martin Ødegaard, to get him back permanently. As the window's gone on, that situation, I've described it a bit like Newton's cradle. It's gone back and forth so much as to whether he's going to stay at Madrid or whether he's going to go. We just don't really know, and it just keeps going back and forth and changing every single day. But what we do know is that, again, thanks to Chris Wheatley, who, as we said earlier, had an amazing day reporting wise yesterday with the exclusives that he brought, reported that Arsenal have offered kind of a cash plus player deal. We don't know what the player is. We don't know the specifics of the amount, but it's reported to be around 60-ish kind of million. How do you feel about James Maddison as a player? And is he the kind of player that you'd like Arsenal to go for in that position? And also, how does that affect our boy, the Smith? So,
Smith. Well, look, I think the first thing to say about the Smith is that it is great news. It's great to see him as the number 10, but we can't expect him to play every minute of 38 Premier League games plus cup competitions. Hopefully we go far in the League Cup and also in the FA Cup. So that's plenty of fixtures, even without European football. Yeah. You know, you wouldn't go into the season with just one striker. So you can't go into a season with just one creative midfield player. Now, you know, again, I think Bukayo Saka is a player who can take up some of the slack in that area if required. I'm not saying he's a classic 10, but certainly he's got the ability to give us cover and give us a little bit of depth there. And I'm curious to see exactly what the plan is for him next season. Maddison is a good player. You know, he's 24. He fits into that age profile of the signings that we've been making this summer. And that kind of goes back to the Xhaka thing just a little bit, because I think when you are lower in the age profile of the squad, you do need to balance it with some experience. And I think Xhaka is, you know, obviously seen as somebody who's part of that sort of experience leadership group or whatever you want to call it. Maddison, I think he's a good player. Is he a number 10? I'm not 100% sure on that. I mean, he even said it himself last season. I don't see myself as a 10. I'm more of a number 8. Is he going to come in and play as part of a midfield 3 in a 4-3-3? That would be certainly interesting. Yeah. It's a fair amount of money. It's a fair amount of money to give Leicester as well, given how well they've spent it of late. And they're a team that we're literally in competition with for a top 6 position next season. So there's, you know, a question there as to whether that's something you consider or not when you make a transfer like this. Personally, my preference would still be for Martin Odegaard. I like him. I like his potential. I think he's 22. You know, he's just at the right age to start coming into his best years. He knows the club. He is more of a classic 10, maybe a modern twist on a classic 10. But, you know, there'd be no issues with settling in or anything like that. It depends on whether Real Madrid are going to sell. I think they've got some issues with Toni Kroos now, don't they? An injury problem. So that might have an impact on what they do. I feel like Real Madrid are open to any offer that might be deemed acceptable given their financial situation, though. So I get the sense that if we really push the boat out for Martin Odegaard, if he's a player we really wanted, we could get him and we could get it done. But Smith Rowe does give you time to push that out to the end of the window. You know, his presence does allow you to you know, to have a bit more flexibility or negotiation space for that. So I think it's going to be an interesting one. There is a lot of talk about Maddison. There's a lot of chatter about it. I'd be curious to know which players or player was offered to Leicester. I mean, they were after Maitland-Niles last year. So maybe Maitland-Niles is a guy that they feel like they could bring in. You know, so I do think it's an important signing. It is going to be an important signing for us, but I'm not quite sure yet what way it's going to go. It might be just a case that they're playing the two situations to see what's most likely or who becomes available.
Yeah, which would be smart, because to put all your eggs in one basket, like it felt a bit like we did that with Locatelli from the reports, the way it went, and we waited kind of too long to see if that deal or he would ever be interested, and he never was going to be because he wants to go to Juve. So it feels like that kind of was an all eggs in one basket kind of situation. But the Maddison Odegaard kind of situation, I lean definitely in towards your court. I like the idea of Odegaard. I think he's already transitioned. I think that what we saw in 6 months is just a small sample size of what he can do. He came off the back of a 6 months prior to that where he didn't really play, was injured for quite a bit of it, and then had to come to a brand new league. And I think what he showed in that time was really positive. And I think he would work. And I think he has showed that he can play with Smith Rowe as well, which is a really good kind of asset to also have in the team. So I'd like it. And I think he'd be cheaper. And it means maybe you could then put some, you know, finances elsewhere, which could be really important.
I mean, another thing to say is that at this moment, as it stands, you know, with the squad, and we're looking for this creative midfielder, Joe Willock gives us an option as an attacking midfielder. Not a creative midfielder per se, but certainly an attacking midfielder who can contribute in the final third. So as a way of bolstering what Smith Rowe gives us in terms of creativity and in terms of link-up play, etc., etc., Joe Willock could certainly give us a goal threat until such time as we get this situation fully sorted out one way or the other. So there is a bit of depth there, but I think the creative element of this midfielder is going to be crucial, because we didn't score enough goals last season, and we don't create enough chances, and those two things obviously go hand in hand. So bringing in a creative midfielder who can also chip in with, 5 to 8 Premier League goals would be very, very useful, because we just do not score enough goals from midfield. I think we had 2 from our central midfielders last season. I think Xhaka got 1, didn't he, against Chelsea, and maybe Ceballos got 1 at some point. I can't quite remember, but to have only 2 goals from your central midfield players all season long, that tells you that there's room for improvement there.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that Joe Willock is, ever since obviously we lost Aaron Ramsey, we kind of lost those goals from that area. And Joe, I think, kind of is, in a weird way, kind of fills that role that Ramsey, he's not an out-and-out number 10. I never looked at Ramsey as an out-and-out number 10. And I look at Willock as kind of your box-to-box, but as a goal-scorer midfielder that loves to not just be box-to-box, but get into the other box, which you said. So, and weirdly also an aerial threat. He was really good in the air for Newcastle, and I think we lack that kind of ability to have someone that runs into the box and is willing to get on the end of crosses. So he adds that to his game. And it was actually kind of the next area that I wanted to talk about, is that, do you think it's the right choice? I suppose for you, when does it become the right choice to sell Joe Willock, based upon kind of the financial side of an offer from Newcastle? If they say come in with a 20-ish million pound bid, is that enough to convince you that it's worth selling him this window?
I think at the start of the window, I might have said no, but given the issues that we're having selling anybody at all, there comes a point where beggars can't be choosers, if you like, that if there are not going to be substantial offers for some of the other players that we move on, then it kind of forces your hand a little bit as a football club, because we are going to have to bring in some money, no question about it. And I think there are probably players that we would like to sell before we have to make a decision about Joe Willock. I think we all know the names, and I think their futures would be much more easily sorted if anyone came in with a half decent bid for them. We would take it, and then that gives you a little bit of a cushion when it comes to Joe Willock, where you can say, we don't need that money quite as badly. Whereas if we get to the middle of August and we still haven't moved on anyone of note for any kind of fee, and Newcastle come in with a 20 million, 25 million, whatever it might be for Joe Willock, I think that has a big impact on the decision, even if you might like to keep the player as somebody who can give you something just a little bit different in midfield. And that's a tough one. That's going to be a tough one, because I think there is a need to balance the books and to bring in some money that might be reinvested somewhere else. We've already spent £75 million this summer, and we haven't brought in anything beyond the guarantee of whatever it is, 10 million from Matteo Guendouzi next summer. So that's sort of down the line. So we're operating at a fairly substantial loss as it is, and we still need a goalkeeper. We still need that attacking midfielder we've talked about, maybe a striker, who knows? So where's the money going to come from? So I think what will happen with Joe Willock could well be dictated to by what happens with some of the other players that are in the team. Like if you get 15 million for Maitland-Niles and someone gives you 12 million for Lacazette, and you get 10 million for Reece Nelson, and Willian goes away somewhere, then I think anywhere, please. Then I think you have a bit more room to consider what sort of offer is on the table for Joe Willock. But if it is the only offer, then it forces your hand a bit.
Like Emi Martinez was the only offer back then. And and someone in the chat said Newcastle will flip Willock in a year and get 40 million for him. And
that'll be just what I look for, right. Yeah.
Yeah, and the thing is, though, that's definitely something that could happen, because the thing is that he'll play week in, week out for Newcastle, and he could have a 6 months that he had last year across an entire season, and then his market value may be that. But I don't see his market value ever really being that for Arsenal unless he plays week in, week out, which does not look likely right now, even if he was to stay. So. And that's kind of the thing you got to weigh up. Last point before we have 10 minutes of questions from the chat box is the enigma that is the right back situation. It's just a really strange kind of area of the pitch that you don't really know what's going on, because we are similar to midfield in terms of bodies, well stocked it, but in terms of quality, it's questionable. The Bellerin situation doesn't look like resolving anytime soon, and Arsenal, we don't know if they're going to warm to the idea of Milan taking him for a loan with an option or not. You've got Chambers, who I, to be honest, really like. I like Callum Chambers. I appreciate a lot of what he did at the end of last season at right back. I think he's carried that on with the performances in pre-season as well. And say, in my view anyway, before I get your thoughts, if we were to say we deal with all the other areas of the pitch and Chambers is our right back until at least January, I'm fine with that. I'm kind of okay with it. You've then got Cedric, who I just don't think is a good player. I think he's a very average player, and surplus at Southampton, and ironically now surplus at Arsenal. And then you've got as well Ainsley Maitland-Niles, who we talked about in midfield, who has played, of course, at right back, should we need him to. So how do you feel about the right back situation? And do you think it would be the right choice for Arsenal to kind of bend to the will of Inter Milan and allow Bellerin to leave on loan? And would you still then go for an improvement there if we could?
I mean, I think in an ideal world, I would like an improvement on all of the players that we have in that position. Yeah. If you'd said if you turned around 2-3 years ago and said that you're going to go into the start of the 2021-22 season with Callum Chambers as your first choice right back, I think people would have said you're crazy, and that's not good. And I'm with you on Chambers. I think of the players we have at the moment, I think he's the best option that we have at right back. Yeah. I like him. I think he's a good player. He's got good delivery in the final third. I do worry about, I think he's got some, he's not the quickest. So I think that sometimes has an impact on his decision-making when he's playing at right back. And, I don't think it's ideal. I don't think any of the players we have in that position are ideal. I'm with you on Cedric. I think he's very average. It was a ludicrous thing to give him a 4-year contract. I don't know what was going on there. If I were KSE, I'd be suspicious of that. Maybe there was something weird with that deal. I don't know. Bellerin, I think it's really sad what's happened to Hector, to be honest. I think the ankle injury he had a real impact on him in terms of his pace. I think the cruciate injury has had a real impact on him as well. It's really strange, I think, and sad to see a player decline quite so sharply in their mid-20s like he has. And maybe it's just he needs a change of scenery or something like that. I mean, I love Hector. I think he's a great guy. But the player that he is now is a long way from the player that he was at 21 years of age, and certainly where we thought he was going to be based on the way he broke through into the team at that age. Yeah. So, look, I wouldn't be offering Hector a new contract, and that's a rumor that's doing the rounds as well, which is a really strange one. So, I think just the sheer number of players we have in that position and the difficulty that we have in moving players on means that we're not going to see a right back upgrade during this window. I think Chambers will start the season. Maybe competition from Hector, maybe competition from Callum Chambers will keep everyone on their toes, and it'll create a competitive environment, and somebody will really step up to the plate. But I don't think it's ideal. I don't think it is the perfect situation for Arsenal. If you're looking for like a player like Kieran Tierney, I'm not talking about having a right back Kieran Tierney, but certainly in terms of the quality of player that we've got at left back. Yeah. Like, we don't know what Tavares is going to be like, but we know he can give us something in the attacking third. We don't know what kind of a defender he is yet. But look, Tierney is brilliant. You don't necessarily want a like for like player, but I think you would like something relatively similar in terms of their overall quality.
Yeah.
And I don't think we're anywhere close at right back. And it's a difficult situation for the club to try and sort out. Who's paying money for Hector, who's paying money for Cedric. If Chambers, he has a contractual situation that we've got to look at as well. I think he's got a year, maybe a year plus an option. So we might, it takes some of the panic away. But I think medium term, they've got to be thinking very, very hard about that position, because it's an area we can definitely improve in.
And I think we will be one we eventually do. I agree with you. I don't think it will be this summer. I think there's just too much to do elsewhere that will leave us short in that role. Well, we're not short is the thing. We're not short at all. So last 10 minutes, I'm going to jump into the chat box, guys, and get some of your thoughts and feelings and questions too. Earlier on, we did have a super chat from Jasho, who just briefly touched upon the Xhaka situation again. So the Xhaka thing really complicates everything for me. He's not a defensive midfielder, apparently, but while he's there, we won't sign an out-and-out defensive midfielder, which is what we really need. Just briefly on that, and to kind of add something to it, I get the question, I get the point, in fact, that I feel like we do need a number 6 in the midfield to really kind of be a disciplined presence so that Partey can be more expressive. And we talk about the fabled Partey partner, but I look at that as a defensive mid who is like a Basuma that will stay disciplined and allow the 1 or 2, if you were to go to a 4-3-3, flourish ahead of them. Are you concerned, not concerned, but are you surprised that we didn't go harder for someone like Basuma in this window?
Well, no, because I don't think any of the players that we've been linked with were that profile of player. So it doesn't sound like it's something we're looking for. So on that basis, I'm not that surprised. I suspect that we're looking for players of a particular profile, because I think the way they're planning to progress the ball this season, I think Ben White is going to play a big part in that.
Yeah.
So they want a passer at centre half. They want someone who can carry the ball at centre half. I like what Thomas Partey can do. I think, getting him further forward and allowing him to express himself is good. But I mean, if you were to say Arsenal need a number 6 and they're going to sign a guy from Atletico Madrid who did that kind of job for Diego Simeone, we have that player. We have that player. So maybe it is just a case that they want a different profile of central midfielder. They want a passer. They want someone who can spread the ball. They're not necessarily looking for the sort of, I guess, somebody who would play in a similar kind of way to Elneny, if you like. Get the ball, give it, and let the other players do something with it. An upgrade on that, of course, would be very welcome. But I don't think they're looking for that fabled DM. I just don't think they're looking for it. So, we have to. I suppose we have to have some hope that they know what they're doing in that regard.
Hope. It's an emotion that we've had.
I was going to say trust or faith, but I felt like those were words that
yearning.
They're asking quite a lot of Arsenal fans and the audience to get on board with that. So I was just saying, yes, let's hope.
Alan Matthews says, do you think Torreira has a chance in the squad? He was good until he was put out of position by Unai, who clearly Alan's got a bit of an issue with shouting his name every time he says it. If we couldn't sell him, do you think he would fit into the way that we want to play? Are you for giving him a chance or not?
It's a really difficult one, this, because I think when he arrived, a lot of us thought, wow, this is a player who's giving us some of the stuff that we've been missing. Going back to the DM, I mean, that's what he appeared to be really good at, was winning tackles, nicking the ball, et cetera, et cetera. And his role got a little bit mixed up, didn't it, by Unai Emery, where he started playing him further forward the way, I mean, it happened with Kante as well for a while at Chelsea. Remember where they said, well, you've got these qualities, let's get you winning the ball higher up the pitch, and that might have an impact on the team. I think the Torreira situation is a bit weird. He's not back yet. I asked the club, the press office during the week, if they could tell me when he was back, and they said, we don't have a date, which is odd. So, I don't quite know what's happening there. I mean, if he stayed, I think there's some football for him to play. He'd give us some depth in central midfield. Like, if you ask me what I prefer, Torreira or Mohamed Elneny, I'd prefer Torreira, because I think there's just a bit more upside, from him in terms of what he can do with the ball and how he plays. I just don't think he really fits with what Mikel Arteta wants. I don't think he particularly wants to stay in England. I think a lot has gone on with him, you know, personally, some family tragedy and all of that kind of stuff. And maybe that's just recalibrated his brain. I think he might want to go back to Italy, or he might want to go to Spain again. And that's a difficult situation again to deal with, because he does have a contract with us and everything else. So am I for giving him a chance? I think probably the best thing for all concerned is for us to try and sell him this summer. He's one of those who's on the list that if the right offer came in, I think the club would take it. I think they'd take it. So
yeah, I think they take below probably their asking price for a player like Torreira, I think, just to kind of move him off the books. Good question here from Tulip, who says, if we sign someone like Maddison, Emil Smith-Rowe could certainly add to the list of players that can play in a wider position, as he kind of did when Erdogan was here. How then do you see Gabriel Martinelli's future being affected by that?
This is a really interesting one. I'm really, really curious to see what the role for Martinelli is going to be this season, because a lot of the time he's played on the left. And I think he's good there. I do wonder if centre forward could be his position. I think there were some quotes a couple of weeks ago where he talked about Aubameyang playing in his position, or, you know, something like that. Not complaining, but just sort of an off the cuff kind of remark, which made you think he is going to be, or sees himself as a striker. I think the other thing to take into account here is, where does Saka play? Where does Bukayo Saka play this season? Because we've got Pepe on the right hand side, and you know, Pepe finished the season really strongly and has looked really good in pre-season. So if Pepe's starting the season, we assume he will, because Saka's had some extended holidays after the Euros, and he plays well, where does Saka get back into the team? Could he give you more on that left-hand side? Could a Saka-Tierney left side provide something transformative in terms of our goal threat, our attacking threat, our creative threat down that left-hand side? I think it could.
Me too.
I think it could. And I don't rule out Saka playing more centrally either. You know, perhaps a little deeper in the midfield. And again, as I said, he could be somebody who could give us some creative juice in that sort of central attacking midfielder role at times. But then where does Martinelli play? That's a big question. I can't say. I don't know. Arteta spoke quite excitedly about him, you know, in terms of some of the young players. You talked about Tierney, you talked about Smith-Rowe, you talked about Martinelli, the kind of players who can provide excitement, get you up off your seats, you know, and have a really positive impact on the team. So it sounds like, you know, he's excited for what Martinelli can bring to the team, but where exactly he's going to play, I don't know. I mean, if Aubameyang stops or doesn't start scoring again, and your only other option is Lacazette, who's what, a 12 to 15 goal a season player in the Premier League, then there's, what else have you got? You've got Balogun, of course.
Yeah.
But also Martinelli. So you know, while we think about improvements and more signings, there is a bit of a not a block, but there's certainly a lot of pieces to fit into a limited number of holes, if you like. When you think about Saka, Martinelli, Aubameyang, Lacazette, Pepe, Balogun, who am I missing? Smith-Rowe, Willock, you know, did I mention Martinelli? I think I did. Yeah. You know, so there's a lot of players for 4 positions. So I'm really curious to see what happens with Martinelli. I hope that this will be a breakthrough season for him, because the talent is there, the potential is there, but quite where he's going to fit into the team, I'm not sure yet. I think we'll have to discuss this again in maybe 6 months' time, and we'll see what way it's played out a bit over the course of the season.
Yeah, it's really intriguing to see what we do, because I'm glad you mentioned about Saka on the left, because that's where I kind of see his future. I know he's flourished on the right. He did it for England this summer as well. But I look at Pepe. If you're gonna extract the best from Pepe, and whilst I think that it was kind of a bit of a revitalization of him playing him on the left during that Christmas period, a bit to get him back in form. But I think Pepe is a goal-scoring wide player, and he needs to be on the right to be able to do that to the best of his ability. And I think that if you put Xhaka left, it accentuates his creative abilities, which I think are better than his goal-scoring abilities, to be honest. So I think that'll work. Anyway, a massive thank you, Andrew, for coming on this afternoon. Really appreciate your time, as always.
Thank you very much. Good to be on.
Tell people where they can find you.
Oh, Arseblog. Just look up Arseblog. That's where you'll always find me. Got nothing else going on in my life apart from, Arsenal and Arseblog.
And the dogs as well.
And the dogs, of course. Yeah, no, dogs. They're great. So been out with them this morning already. So they keep me relatively fit and get me lots of fresh air. So yeah. That's where it is.
A friend of mine's got a puppy cocker spaniel and is sending very cute photos to the lads WhatsApp group. So
right, it's something wholesome content that I'm sure is in short supply in the lads WhatsApp group.
Of course. Anyway, thank you so much, Andrew, again. And of course, if you've enjoyed today's show, you can drop a like on the video and subscribe to the channel if you're new around here with those notifications turned on. And you can vote for us in the Football Content Awards too. Information's scrolling across your screen, and more of it is in the description as well. I'll see you a little bit later on this afternoon for another show, and of course tomorrow morning for the update. It's been an absolute pleasure to speak to you as always, and as always, up the Arsenal.